based upon our discussion yesterday evening, some of you may have attended it. It didn't get completed. The topic was Krishna rescuing Nanda Maharaj from the abode of Varuna. That was the topic. It took a long time because it was translated to Chinese, most of the slides. So I plan to go back next time we're together with the Chinese devotees and do a review. And in the review, the main topics that are highlighted in that pastime, because Krishna's pastimes are unlimited, right? So some of the main transcendental messages in Krishna's pastimes will be highlighted. And one of them I want to cover right now, and that is, it applies to this Uddhava Gita topic. That's why I'm discussing it. There, and it came up in the questions yesterday on Uddhava Gita. Krishna is unlimited. From Krishna comes everything, and even everything is not everything, because Krishna is unlimited. And there are different realizations of Krishna from different perspectives. And the same Krishna, different realizations can be there about Krishna. And they're not, if this one's the realization, then it can't be that one. If that one, it can't be another one. For example, a nice example is Krishna entering into the wrestling arena of Kamsa. There's a celebrated verse where something like 9 or 11 or whatever the number is, different, as Krishna is entering into the wrestling arena, different personalities or groups of persons experience Krishna this way, and then that way, then the other way. You have a singing bird outside your window. It's really got a concert going on. That's what I thought was your doorbell.
Oh, okay, because
the bird, he's like singing and singing. A couple of them actually. So, the wrestlers saw him as a thunderbolt. That's how it starts. Kamsa saw him as death personified. The elders saw him as a darling little boy, 12 years old. The young girls saw him as Cupid, and this one saw, there's varieties in each of those groups. So which of it is it? Is it Krishna this or that? And the answer is he's all those things. Similarly, in this pastime, or similarly to the pastime with Krishna rescuing Nanda Maharaj from the abode of Varuna, some acharyas emphasize this because that's their appreciation and realization that's imparted by Krishna to them because of their heart. And it's a reciprocation. Pure devotees have different experiences of Krishna. It's the same Krishna. And they express them in their commentaries. Of course, their commentaries are in alignment with the Sanskrit, following Sanskrit rule. They don't invent something, but following Sanskrit rules, they explain this or they explain that. Like, for example, in the commentary yesterday on what did Varuna make an offense or not? And Sanatana Goswami, through all the chapter, he's apologizing for offense, and Krishna's angry at his offense because from Krishna's side, don't mess with my devotees. You mess with my devotees, you're going to make Krishna angry. Don't offend Krishna's devotees. So he's angry, transcendentally angry. You're not just supposed to be, calm, placid, something. He was angry. And his voice showed it, his face showed it, his words showed it. He was angry. And even before Krishna came and he saw Nanda Maharaj, Varuna was trembling because he knew it was an offense. So he was fearful, Krishna was angry, and that was, one stage of things. And then immediately, Varuna apologized. Krishna said, "Where's my father?" And he didn't even say that your father's over there. He just said, "Any service I can do for you, you please instruct me." Krishna already had instructed him, but he's indicating his submissiveness, and he will show his father. So seeing his submissiveness and his contrite and fearful position, Krishna's mood changed. He put his his anger away, and he became forgiving. And then it went to, "Where's my father?" It was different. The mood was different. So Krishna's mood was different. And Varuna says, "A wrong has been done. My foolish servant did these things, and I take responsibility for my foolish servant's behaviors. My responsibility. So you can punish me or show your mercy, whichever you like. But please don't leave the offense. Offense lingers, then there's obstacle in my relationship with you. So punish me or forgive me, but please remove the offense." It was removed. And then Sanatana Goswami, so was there an offense or was there not an offense? And because he didn't do anything. It was his servant. It wasn't his offense. He had no malice towards Krishna or towards Nanda Maharaj. Because offense has something to do, not everything, but a major part has to do with an attitude towards another person. Offense. And then Sanatana Goswami comes way over here and says, why this happened was Varuna was serving Krishna remotely, and Varuna wanted to see Krishna. And so it was his intention to kidnap Nanda Maharaj on a pretext so that Krishna would come, because he knew Krishna would rescue him. Then he could see Krishna. Wow, my life is perfect. No offense. He wanted to see Krishna. That was so. Someone reading this, or one of our listeners, I know who our listener is, was going to wonder about this one. Is it this or is it that? Or how do we understand it? Because it looks contrary or contradictory. Now here's what we are supposed to do when we hear something that sounds contradictory. And when it's coming from our acharyas, or it can be directly in the Bhagavatam itself, or directly in Prabhupada's writings, something that looks contradictory. There's a very, very wonderful, very simple explanation found in Brahma Samhita text 61. It goes like this: Yadrashi Yadrashi Shraddha Siddhi Bhavati Tadrashi. You can look it up. Yadrashi Yadrashi Shraddha, according to Shraddha, faith. Siddhi Bhavati Tadrashi. So this, so that. According to faith, there's realization. That's how Bhaktisiddhanta translates. Siddhi Bhavati. Siddhi, he translates as realization. Realization Bhavati. Realization arises according to one faith, or Krishna reveals himself to Sanatana Goswami this way because of his heart. Krishna reveals himself to Jiva Goswami that way because of his heart, because of his relationship with Krishna. And is Krishna limited or unlimited? He's unlimited. He's sometimes compared to a Vaidurya stone. A Vaidurya stone it appears to have different colors. Depending upon the atmosphere around it, it takes on this color, that color. So which is the color? Well, it's a Vaidurya stone. It has multicolors. Krishna is like a Vaidurya stone. So it doesn't have to be either this or that. Did Varuna make a mistake? Was there an offense? Was there an offense on the part of a servant? Was there an offense on the part of Varuna where there was no offense at all by anybody? Because the intention was to see Krishna and be with Krishna. That was inconvenience for Nanda, but it facilitated the rest of the pastime. What was the rest of the pastime? Krishna wanted to stimulate the astonishment, because that's a secondary rasa. He wanted to stimulate the astonishment of the residents of Vrindavan. Fantastic. They have their primary rasa, and then here comes the secondary rasa that gets stimulated, and it enhances the primary rasa. And Krishna is enjoying, and as Krishna is enjoying, they're enjoying. So they have a curiosity. We want to see the spiritual world. So Krishna shows them the spiritual world, although they're in the spiritual world. It's really a layer upon layer upon layer of loving exchange between Krishna and his devotees, including the kidnapping of Nanda. So each one of us seated in this room and the online people, you may have a liking for this or that or the other realization. So that's your heart. But it doesn't mean your realization is right and therefore the other ones are not. Especially when it comes, so that the criterion for us is the source is someone who's in samadhi, either Krishna himself or these exalted Vaishnavas or exalted acharyas that have these realizations in their complete absorption of their consciousness in Krishna. And then Krishna reveals himself to them in different ways. And they write it. And it's in keeping with the scripture. They explain why it's in keeping with the scripture. And it's their realization. It's not, realization doesn't mean that's insignificant. It's quite significant. But it's not, their realization doesn't mean Krishna is now limited to their realization. It's how we move about the circle of elevated Vaishnavas and appreciate this one, that one, and the other one, all the variegatedness. Prabhupada gives this example I like. He's speaking to a professor in Scotland. No, Ireland. And in history, in Ireland, there's been bloody wars between Catholics and Protestants. I mean, not just they argue, it's war, battles and blood. And so how to bring unity in between the Protestants and the Catholics. And, Prabhupada explains the principle of unity in diversity. It's the same point. So he points to a vase that's on the desk. He says, see this vase of flowers? There's lots of different colors and lots of different varieties of flowers. It's not that all flowers need to be the same in order that they're a flower. You get a further idea of flowers by the varieties of colors and fragrances and species. So same in a spiritual community where Krishna is at the center, unity and diversity. Or when we get realizations about a pastime, there's different realizations. So that came up yesterday with Uddhava Gita. There was some question, an important question. There's a young girl who took off bangles because she was preparing some rice for some guests, and she was making some noise as she was working with the rice paddy to make, remove the husk from the rice. And she didn't want to disturb them and etc. So she may have looked, one reading is, she was thinking about her prestige because persons of substance, they have an assistant that does things like that. And if they heard the bangles clanging against one another, they would understand, she's not a person of substance. so she removed the bangles. Looked like self-aggrandizing. Then there was another statement, which we're going to hear this morning, about another understanding from one of our acharyas is when you get groups of people together, you're going to have clash. The one simple solution is you don't get groups of people together. But, practical application, you're building community. When people come together, what happens? Like bangles on the wrist when you're doing something. They bang into one another and make some noise. So how do you get unity and diversity? So this topic touches on different realizations. And if this is correct, it doesn't mean that's false, and vice versa. There can be multiple lessons to be learned from one passage or one lila or one. So this is, as you can, well, you're not seeing on the screen. Can we have divided screen? Can they see the divided screen?
Not yet, Gurmat. I'm going to share the screen.
Okay.
This one.
No. No. Okay. Zoom. Low. The thing that's on the left shouldn't be there. Now we go. Okay. Zoom. 3 miles an hour instead of 60. Okay. So there you see on the left side of the screen, that's Uddhava at Krishna's feet in Dwarka. That's where this Uddhava Gita took place. And Krishna is explaining to Uddhava about detachment through knowledge. And one of the ways he's explaining detachment through knowledge to lead to bhakti is by telling a story. And the story is one of our ancestors, King Yadu, one time came across a Avaduta Brahmin. And he started asking Avaduta Brahmin questions like, how did you become so detached? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the Avaduta Brahmin says, I have 24 gurus, and from them I learned detachment through their lessons. And one of the teachers, one of the gurus, is this young girl whose home was visited by some men who were interested in her hand in marriage. Her parents were away and the relatives were away, so she received them very nicely. She went to the kitchen to prepare some food. She's working with her hands, husking the rice, and it's clanging, and so she took some bangles off. That's the story. And then we're going to hear just now the last verse of this little, of the 24 gurus, one about the girl. And this lesson from the girl is not just, she was interested in her own prestige and, favoring the men so they would be attracted to her rather than making all that noise in the kitchen. Here's text 10. Canto 11, chapter 9, text 10. Translation. When many people live together in one place, there will undoubtedly be quarreling. And even if only 2 people live together, there will be frivolous conversation and disagreement. Therefore, to avoid conflict, one should live alone, as we learn from the example of the bracelet of the young girl. So if you're an Avaduta Brahmin, you can live alone. And if you're not, you're going to have these other situations, and you have to learn how to handle the other situations. Okay, here's the BBT purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has given a nice example in this regard. Because the young girl mentioned in this story had no husband, she had to fulfill her duties as a host by removing her bracelets so that each wrist held one bracelet only. In the same way, the process of Gyan Yoga or spiritual advancement by philosophical speculation demands that the speculating sages live alone without any other association. Unfortunately, we're not Gyan yogis. Since Gyanis have dedicated their lives to speculation, there will undoubtedly be endless argument and quarreling on technical points if many Gyanis live together. Therefore, to keep a peaceful atmosphere, they must live alone. On the other hand, a king's daughter who has been duly married to an aristocratic prince fulfills her duties to her husband by dressing herself attractively with innumerable ornaments and approaching him for love. Similarly, the goddess of devotion, Bhakti Devi, decorates herself with the innumerable ornaments of the Vaishnavas, who come together to relish the sweet sound of the holy name of the Lord. Because pure Vaishnavas do not intimately associate with non-devotees, it may be said that they reside alone. And thus they also fulfill the purpose of this verse. There cannot be any quarrel among pure Vaishnavas because they are on the real platform of desirelessness, or not wanting even salvation or mystic powers, but to speak of sense gratification. Because they are all devotees of Krishna, they may freely associate with one another for glorifying the Lord. And then all these commentaries make reference to Kapila Dev's teaching, Canto 3, Chapter 25, on pure devotional service. That's the title of the chapter. And it has to do with sadhu sangha, same topic we spoke about at your home. Text 24, a pure devotee who is attached to the activities of devotional service and who always engages in service at my lotus feet, never desires to become one with me. Such a devotee who is unflinchingly engaged always glorifies my pastimes and activities. Now that implies sadhu sangha, because that's what sadhus do when they get together. What we're doing. Paragraph. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has commented on this verse as follows, quote, the young girl in the story kept only one bracelet on each wrist so that there would be no noisy conflict among the bracelets. Similarly, one should give up the association of those who are not devoted to the Supreme Lord, unquote. This is the actual lesson to be learned. A real Vaishnava is always pure and faultless in character. However, in those places where non-devotees congregate, there will undoubtedly be envious criticism of the devotional service of the Lord, and those who falsely attempt to analyze reality without the Supreme Personality of Godhead will create much disturbing noise in the name of philosophy. Therefore, one should remain in those places where the Supreme Lord is properly worshipped according to the Vedic standard. If everyone is dedicated to glorifying the personality of Godhead Krishna, there will not be any impediment in mutual association. However, in a place where people have many different purposes besides the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, social dealings will certainly be disrupted. Paragraph. One should therefore avoid the association of those who are inimical to devotional service, otherwise one will be frustrated in achieving the spiritual purpose of life. One who always keeps himself in the company of the devotees of the Lord is actually living alone. That's the sadhu sangha principle again. If one lives in a community where the only consideration is the pleasure of the Lord, then one can avoid the contradictory situations caused by many persons competing to satisfy their own material desires. This is the lesson intelligently understood by the Brahmana from the bracelets of the young girl. And finally, in this connection, Srila Madhvacharya quotes the following verse. Gives the Sanskrit. One should not under any circumstances live with those who are not devotees of the Lord. On the other hand, one should stay with many devotees because such association awards liberation. Okay, so now we're going to read two commentaries. Bhaktisiddhanta's commentary, it's similar to the one upstairs, up above. If there is more than one person in a place, there is every possibility that there will be quarrel because each individual has his own idea and purpose. When the girl took away all her bangles except one on each wrist, there was no more noise as a result of colliding with each other. Similarly, one should give up the association of those who are not devoted to the Supreme Lord. The character of a Vaishnava is always pure. However, in places where non-devotees congregate, there will undoubtedly be envious criticism of Vaishnavas. If many people gather to glorify the Lord, there will be no conflict of interest. That's the unity and diversity principle. Paragraph. That is why one should worship the Lord in the association of like-minded people. This is also solitary bhajan, as is described in the system of Ekayana. That's a little technical. And now, Bhaktisiddhanta, you all know who is Bhaktisiddhanta. So Bhaktisiddhanta made a commentary verse by verse on the entire Uddhava Gita. It's a long series of descriptions. So here, one of the things he does is he comments on or summarizes, like makes a gloss of Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur's commentary. So I'm going to read that. The lesson to be learned from the girl who removed all her bangles but one is that one who is trying to advance in the path of Gyan Yoga, which involves philosophical speculation, should live alone after giving up all desires for having the association of friends and relatives. After all, whenever people live together, they quarrel over insignificant matters and engage in much trivial talk that has no relation to their aspiration for spiritual advancement. Therefore, just to have a peaceful environment in which to practice yoga, it is recommended that one live alone. On the other hand, a princess who has been married to a qualified prince dresses herself very attractively and then appears before him to receive his love. Similarly, Bhakti Devi. Bhakti Devi is an expansion of Radharani. We say Bhakti Devi ki jai. That's who she is. Radha's expansion. Bhakti Devi decorates herself with the association of Vaishnavas who assemble to chant the holy names of the Lord and dance in ecstasy. Because pure devotees do not associate with non-devotees, in a sense, they reside alone and thus take the lesson of the single bangle from the young girl. After all, pure devotees do not quarrel among themselves, nor do they engage in frivolous talks because they're fully satisfied on the platform of rendering devotional service to the Lord without any material desires. Thus, devotees of the Lord happily associate with one another for the purpose of rendering service to the Lord. And then he quotes, as Vishwanath quotes, this same verse from Kapila Dev's teachings, 3:25-24. I'll read it again. A pure devotee who is attached to the activities of devotional service and who actually engages in service of my lotus feet never desires to become one with me. Such a devotee who is unflinchingly engaged always glorifies my pastimes and activities. And here's actually what Vishwanath wrote. Just as the poor girl without a husband took off her bracelets to stop the sound, Gyan Yoga makes the sages who practice Gyan live alone. Just as a married princess, on meeting her husband, wears bracelets for making sound, Bhakti Devi makes the devotees who accept her shelter associate with each other for making sounds of sweeter and sweeter Nama Kirtan. They do not remain alone. And then it quotes again, 3:25, 24. These devotees, pure devotees, who are engaged in service of my feet, following scriptural rules, who desire only the taste of my beauty, who, gathering together, relish my pastimes among themselves, never desire to become one with Brahman. Okay, so that's the wrap up of this, of the 24 gurus, the girl and her bracelets. And now he's going to have another guru. This is the Avadhuta Brahman. I think what I'm going to do is in Houston, there's a young girl that is really good. In fact, she did the graphic that you see here. She did this next one. And she's illustrated the verses with graphics. So here we go. You see they're quarreling and poor child, and even the dog is wondering what's going on here. When many people live together in one place, there will undoubtedly be quarreling. And even if only two people live together, there will be frivolous conversation and disagreement. Therefore, to avoid conflict, one should live alone, pure Jnani. And as we learned from the example of the bracelet of the young girl, then here's another nice graphic. That's Vrinda Devi, by the way. But she takes it as Bhakti Devi. Vrinda Devi, because there's parrots all over the place. And Vrinda Devi has so many parrots that she orchestrates Krishna's pastimes through. A king's daughter who has been duly married to an aristocratic prince fulfills her duties to her husband by dressing herself attractively with innumerable ornaments and approaching him for love. Similarly, the goddess of devotion, Bhakti Devi, decorates herself with the innumerable ornaments of the Vaishnavas who come together to relish the sweet sound of the holy name of the Lord. Images, for visual people like me, that's nice. Now, here's another image. This is a BBT painting. Krishna's dancing on the lotus flower. There's cows, so that means it's Goloka. And there's Sankirtan devotees on the left. There's cowherd boys on the right. So, we're in the spiritual world now. And here's also verse 10. Because pure Vaishnavas do not intimately associate with non-devotees, it may be said that they reside alone. And thus, they also fulfill the purpose of this verse. There cannot be any quarrel among pure Vaishnavas because they're on the real platform of desirelessness, not wanting even salvation or mystic powers, what to speak of sense gratification. Because they're all devotees of Krishna, they may freely associate with one another for glorifying the Lord. And here's one more from this chapter. Actually, there's two more. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur has commented on this verse as follows. The young girl in the story kept only one bracelet on each wrist so that there would be no noisy conflict among the bracelets. Similarly, one should give up the association of those who are not devoted to the Supreme Lord, unquote. This is the actual lesson to be learned. A real Vaishnava is always pure and faultless in character. So the illustration is that person in the middle is apparently the Vaishnava. They've got super soul in their heart, and they're guided by super soul in the heart, and the others have different dispositions. Let's look at the background. I mean, her color schemes are really good. I like her artwork. Here's one more from chapter 10, from verse 10. One who always keeps himself in the company of devotees of the Lord is actually living alone. That's the 6 Goswamis. They're living alone. If one lives in a community where the only consideration is the pleasure of the Lord, then one can avoid the contrary situations caused by many persons competing to satisfy their own material desires. So I'm looking at the clock, and it's 5 minutes after 8. And I was thinking to go on to text 11, but maybe I should stop with text number 8 and see where we are, because we started a little early to get some background. Let's see what this next one is. Yeah, that's text 11. Okay. To allow for conversation and questions and answers, because that didn't happen yesterday. Let's see if there's some discussion. Good lessons from the bracelets of the girl.
No questions. Online, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for explaining this concept. I was thinking about this, Maharaj. So we try to understand, how do we understand this? The girl tries to remove the bangle, and then we understood, or we understand that as a person, who is probably following the Jnana, to take on the path of the mental speculation. But how does that compare to a devotee, who fits in the Vajananandi category? Because
Similar. If the Bhajananandi means solitary bhajan, then it's similar. Now, there may be, because Bhakti Siddhanta wrote extensively about that. And he wrote extensively about it because there are persons who are imitating Haridas Thakur. They would go to a solitary place, and imitating, because without the qualification, means they were imitating. They were doing solitary bhajan with the idea of aggrandizement. Oh, the people will think highly of me, when they didn't have that qualification. So that's cheating. And then the second part is, along with their cheating, then they would indulge in sense gratification privately in different ways. So he was like, repeatedly, because it was apparently prevalent at his time. People imitating Babajis, and by solitary bhajan, they weren't qualified. However, he himself, being qualified, did something like that, and his father did something like that, at least for a period of time. But they weren't like, it wasn't for aggrandizement or, gaining honor and prestige from others. Oh, he's a spiritual, elevated person. So for those that are qualified, it may have some place, at least for some period of time. On the other hand, the imitation is dushtamana, a wicked mind. Don't desire that. Don't go there. So then what do you desire? You desire what's being shown here. Enjoying kateyantash chamam nityam tushanti cha ramanti cha from Bhagavad Gita. That's what one desires, discussing topics of Krishna And even when you discuss topics of Krishna, as I was pointing out earlier, there may be different points of view, which is part of the nectar. It would be kind of monotonous if it was always pablumized one thing. So we have some online. That's what the microphone is for. Okay.
In Zoom, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please explain your obeisances. What happens when devotional services are performed unwillingly and grudgingly?
You know that from Bhagavad Gita. Austerity in the mode of ignorance. You go down. That's what happens when you do it begrudgingly. Now, there's benefit, just that there's devotional service, but it's detriment consciousness-wise if you're feeling begrudging, because devotional service itself is transcendental. So what to do? That's the next question. Do things voluntarily and lovingly. Even if it's something that I know is good for me, like taking medicine. I know it's good for me. I don't like it. I like over there, and over there may be okay, but too much of it is not okay. You need something over here. So there may be, because I know it's good for me, that's not begrudgingly, because I know it's good for me, I do. That's different than begrudgingly. Like, chanting. Some people have difficulty. They can do lots of other services, but chanting is, for some, it's difficult. So we don't push such a person, but they in time at least, should be encouraged because it's good for you. It's Yuga Dharma. So at least to some degree, take up chanting because it's good for you. Next.
The third person is asking this. So if someone is not interested in devotional services, should they be left alone?
Well, in one answer is yes. Another answer is everyone likes prasadam. I mean, one of the topics I wanted to discuss with you is there's a devotee couple. They have 2 children, and at his workplace, he has gone out of his way to develop friendships with his American coworkers. Now, there are other Indian coworkers, but he's gone out of his way to develop friendships with his American coworkers. And he shared with me or his wife shared with me, when they had their first child, they didn't have to buy anything because all the coworkers, here's this and here's that and here's the other thing and the other thing and the other thing. They didn't ask, but just because they had affection. So now they have over a few years, they have a little group and they get together and they do things together. And, whether they're interested in Krishna Bhakti, they like this couple, they like the association because the couple are Krishna Bhaktas, they're getting bhaktiized. And, prasadam and vegetarian cooking and making cakes and, things that the families like. And then slowly, because it's who they are, they explain about prasadam and slowly. So it's like they have, I don't know exactly where it is now, I'll find out more. But it's entering into the bhakti arena. Now, it didn't start with, hey, devotional service, because we're from India and we know that you do devotional service. Let's do some devotional service. But they do things together that they like to do together. And so that's community. And then, bhakti arises because that's up on the soul platform. So if somebody doesn't have attraction, the question was, do we stay away from them? It depends on your capacity and your heart. And we don't, bhakti, we don't, for those who are householders, there's a few householders around. For those who are householders, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains this in detail. I was thinking to mention it. When you're a householder, what do you do? Because you go to work and there's Lots of people that aren't devotees. So what do you do? Etc. etc. So he gives like really clear, very clear guidelines of what to do. So you're in short, you're pleasant, but you don't engage in very personal discussions about decisions in life. What do you think? Should I do about this and that? How are you? How's your family? Da 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 da. You're socially polite, and that's what you do. And then things that are personal and meaningful, you keep that for the devotee sangha. And there's other things. For those interested in that topic, this person asking the question, Bhakti Aloka is the title of the book by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he covers the 6 activities that enhance bhakti, the 6 activities that destroy bhakti. And in both of those lists of 6 and 6, there's something to do with association. Giving up unwholesome association, taking wholesome association. And in those 2 sections, he gives really nice details for householders, what to do. We don't what are you going to do? You're in the workplace and there are people that aren't devotees. You're in the world and there are people that aren't devotees. What do you do? Well, you don't intimately associate with them. You're friendly. And if they start to be inimical, then you keep a distance. But otherwise, you're in your heart, 2 things. In your heart, you want to give bhakti, but they're not ready to receive it. So you keep that in your heart. So you're protected. That's your inoculation, your COVID vaccine inoculation. It's in your heart. You want to give bhakti, but they don't want to receive it. But it stays in your heart. And then the other is externally, you're just, you're polite. By the norms of society, you're polite. So people view this devotee as, oh, they're a nice person, they're very polite. And inside you're looking, praying to Krishna. If some opportunity can arise to give bhakti, please open that door. And Krishna will open doors that otherwise wouldn't open. That's what to do with non-devotees.
That's the comment from the person is. Thank you very much, Maharaj. And there's another question in YouTube. Guru Maharaj, in regard to interpersonal conflict and the reference of single bracelet analogy, what can be the guiding principle for us to stay protected from our own tendencies of getting disturbed?
A principle to protect yourself from getting disturbed is Shuddha Bhakti. Because when there's Shuddha Bhakti, you won't be disturbed. It's right in Bhagavad Gita. And, if without that, you're going to be disturbed. Then you have to manage those disturbances within the mind, called stress management. But the principle is you have a relationship with Krishna, and that's your place of shelter. And I'm not going to let go of that relationship with Krishna for anything, because that's my shelter. And because you're at least targeted towards that place of shelter, then you can be very tolerant. Tantatiksha svabharata. Because you have a place of shelter. If you don't have a place of shelter, then you can just be tossed around by the waves of turmoil. Like a piece of wood on the ocean where the waves go up and down. You're just tossed around by your emotions.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Attending your class was very nice, and seeing these beautiful ways of depicting bhakti and learning, and it actually gave me an inspiration for my younger daughter. She really likes to do this, and I told her that if you read Ramayana, then I'm going to buy the software which she buys, which she wants. So So that actually opened another path for us that we could use her talent for some of these activities. And I'm going to work with Satya Prabhu and hopefully he guide us and see how we can actually.
Shruti Mangra just lives in Houston. I'm sure she'd be willing to coach her daughter. I mean, because styles are going to be different. Shruti's style is very different, very wonderful. And your daughter's going to be different, but she can coach. That's an idea.
And Maharaj, one other question. Here we talked about how devotees come together. So when we chant, I mean, our 16 rounds, and after that, should we focus on increasing our rounds, or should we focus on collective chanting and collective reading?
I'm an advocate of balance. In fact, I'll just share this with you. You might be interested in attending the class. While I'm in Houston, a devotee group is going to come from Gainesville, University of Florida in Gainesville. Your son is paying attention now. And it's multiple students, 5, 6, 7 students, whatever, to help the Houston community develop something similar in Houston. And I think it'd be great for University of Austin also, Krishna House. So I was asked to give a class, 2 classes, just for his little group, but others can listen. So one of the things, and he wanted, the request was something practical. So in response to your question, one of the topics I want to talk about is how reading Srimad Bhagavatam will help you chant japa. That's the topic, because they go together. Harikatha and Namavrata. That's going to be the topic. So I would say, other than your 16 rounds, have some selected readings, maybe reading the Bhagavatam or reading the Bhagavatam with others or something, because it's heart transforming. And then the picture of who is Krishna comes out more and more and more and more and more. That's like, we have an idea, a notion of Krishna, we chant his name, but who is Krishna? The fullness of Krishna comes out through Srimad Bhagavatam. And one will help the other. So in addition to, different devotees have different interests. I know some devotees, they just like increasing their chanting. Fantastic. If that's the interest, fantastic. And otherwise, if it's not specifically the impetus, then the balance of Harikatha, because it will enrich your chanting. And your chanting will be enriched by reading Harikatha. Vice versa, one will help the other. And Srimad Bhagavatam is way up there for that purpose. And other literatures help understand Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's not like the Bhagavad Gita over there, but Srimad Bhagavatam is very special. Something else? In the back? No? You have something.
Yes. It's slightly out of topic, but Go Brahmana Hitayacha. Krishna is a protector of both Brahmanas and cows. How do we explain this to general public? Because they see it as, there is no cow killings are happening, and there is no protection of Brahmana in general sense.
Well, I don't know if you start with people in general with those 2 topics. It depends on the audience and it depends on your mood, both. I mean, it's different, depends on the person. So, if you're just sharing, you can say something like, there are different conceptions of God. You just, start simple and build up. So there's some conceptions of God, but all religions teach to love God. And when you love somebody, that which is important to that somebody, you honor that which is important to that somebody because it's part of loving that somebody. And the quality of goodness is very dear to God, just like cleanliness is next to godliness. So, and that's all part of living God. It's just cleanliness stand alone, it's next to godliness. And those things that are in the quality of goodness, that's dear to God. So we honor that which is dear to God because we want to love him. And then, so brahmanas, by definition, they're in the quality of goodness, and cows, by definition, they're in the quality of goodness. So we honor them because they're dear to Krishna. We protect them because they're dear to Krishna. We protect all persons, but especially those in the mode of goodness. And here's why. What's the importance of persons in the mode of goodness is they give us nice teachings because their hearts are pure in the quality of goodness. They can give us a clear reading of what the scriptures teach us about how to live our lives and so forth and so on. So that's the brahmanas, and then the cows. They don't have claws. They need protection. It's the species that's for protection. And they're in the quality of goodness. So it depends on the person. But the end of the discussion is generally with people, oh, that's nice. And then they move on to the next thing. It's just a curiosity, like what's the deal with cows and brahmins? They don't really intend to apply, it's just information. But at least it gives them an explanation of why we live our lives the way we live our lives. We're not trying to impress, but then it depends on the person. You may want to say something a little stronger. Cow killing civilization. You do violence to those in the mode of goodness. What do you expect? In the laws of karma. I mean, so it depends on the person. But the purpose is not to bash. The purpose is to educate and elevate. It depends on how much they can be elevated. That's subjective. Your intelligence has to guide you with how to speak. Then you circle back to the purpose of all religion is to love God and serve him. That's the main point. And anything that you can do that can help you come to the stage of loving God and serving him, that's good. That's something to be accepted. Okay. Go ahead.
From WhatsApp. In the mode of goodness, will people show partiality?
In the mode of goodness, do people show partiality? Well, it depends on what you mean. Showing partiality has to be defined. Can there be different? There can be different definitions. Like, let's take Krishna's position. He's impartial and he's partial. He reciprocates with those that hold him with love and devotion. But that's love. It's not partiality in the material sense. It's a reciprocation of love. So similarly, a person in the mode of goodness can, just like this verse that we discussed, can show a special affection and affinity towards and closeness in the association of devotees that looks like partiality. Looks like partiality. Hey, you're not equal to everybody. But we have rather, we're associating with people appropriate for their character, and a devotee is not a person in the mode of goodness. A devotee in the mode of goodness is not partial to those in the mode of goodness. They're just naturally reciprocating because scriptures enjoin us to associate this way with this group and that way with that group and the other with the other group. It's just discrimination. It's the factor of understanding the circumstance and acting appropriately for the purpose of furthering love of God and not compromising love of God.
Thank you.
We're done. We're done. Anything more? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
8:30. Good timing.